Husband got gifts from his kids at Christmas while my baby and I were excluded, so I refused to spend any more on his family. I'm a 38-year-old woman, married to my 50-year-old husband for 10 years now. Together, we had a beautiful 1-year-old daughter. My husband has 2 kids from his previous marriage, a 30-year-old son and a 28-year-old daughter. From day one, I always made an effort to be welcoming to his children. I bought them birthday presents, Christmas gifts, even cards and little tokens for every holiday. Gift giving is how I show love, it's my nature. Still, I'd always get those snide remarks about being too festive. Now, both his son and daughter have children of their own. His son is a father to 3 under 5, and his daughter has twin 2-year-old girls. This last Christmas, his daughter and her husband hosted the family Christmas party. There's this tradition where every household buys a gift for other households, and we all exchange them together. For the record, my husband's kids have never bothered to get me anything for Christmas, not that it upset me. I've always been the one making sure there were gifts for my stepchildren and now step-grandchildren. My husband just gives gift cards to his adult kids. So, this year at the party, as gifts started going around, I watched everyone receiving theirs: my husband, my stepson and his wife, their 3 kids, my stepdaughter, her husband and their twins. Everyone had something to open, except for me and, glaringly, my baby daughter. They bought gifts for each other, and yes, I had again bought gifts for every single one of them. But not a single person thought to get even a small token for my little girl, their own half-sister, their blood. I felt the sting immediately. I gathered my things, picked up my daughter, and quietly left the party. Afterward, when I talked to my husband, I laid it all out honestly. I told him I had never truly felt like part of his family, I could live with that. But to deliberately exclude their own half-sibling left me heartbroken and furious. I said I'd never spend another cent on his family because, clearly, they are not mine. If that wasn't enough, they even organized a family photo shoot and intentionally left my baby girl out. I can't help but wonder, am I wrong for drawing the line here? Or is this just what finally needed to happen? When I was pregnant, it was a high-risk pregnancy, and I was out of work for a while, surviving on short-term disability payments that fell well below what I usually made. Our mattress was awful and sleeping on it, especially pregnant, was torture. I begged him for a new mattress. He said they were expensive, said he'd look into it. He never bought it for us. But then his adult daughter decided to read it as to decorate her guest bedroom and wanted a new mattress. Same size as ours, a queen. He dropped everything and bought her one right away, no questions asked, no hesitation. That's what it is. That's what it's always been. Update 2. Last night, I decided to break the silence and call my husband's second ex-wife on Facebook Messenger. I had no idea if she'd even want to speak to me, especially since I'm the new wife in the picture. To my surprise, she picked up, and we actually had a pleasant conversation. She opened up about her own experience with his kids. She said she never had any problems with his son, who was an adolescent at the time, but that his daughter was a whole different story. She described her as having a serious princess mentality, always acting like she was the queen of her daddy's castle. She told me a couple stories showing how my husband would flat out ignore her feelings whenever his daughter treated her badly. His daughter made it abundantly clear who really ran the house. Eventually, his ex-wife told me, she started distancing herself from his kids. That wedge between her and his children ended up taking a big toll on their marriage. Then she hit me with something I wasn't expecting. She had discovered that, at the beginning of my relationship with my husband, he had actually been sleeping with his supervisor. The news shook me. I confronted him with what I'd learned, and he spent hours denying it, but eventually, he admitted it was true. For some background, the previous summer, I actually caught him sexting the same supervisor. I told him to leave, even though we had just welcomed a new baby. We started marriage counseling soon after to try and repair the damage from his infidelity. Throughout counseling, he always swore he'd told me everything there was to know, that there were no more secrets. But he never told me that the affair with his supervisor went further back to the early months of our relationship, when they had a sexual relationship. Suddenly, I was supposed to believe that, after 9 years, their sexting picked up out of the blue and that nothing had happened between them throughout all these years we've been married. It just didn't add up. First thing this morning, I called a divorce attorney. I need to know my options. If my attorney says it won't affect my case, I'll keep you updated on what happens next. Update 3. I met with the attorney. She was calm and direct and used words that made my stomach drop. I went home, put my daughter in her bouncer, and started printing everything I could think of: bank statements, credit card statements, Zelle histories, years of our life in gray and white. I thought it would just be a few pages. The printer kept chewing through paper. Buried in there were hotel charges I didn't recognize on nights he'd told me he was stuck doing inventory. That stung, but the thing that took the air from the room wasn't a hotel. It was a string of transfers 2.5 years ago, to a fertility clinic with my stepdaughter's last name in the memo. Another chunk a month later to a specialty pharmacy. It added up to a number I had to read 3 times. I remembered those months exactly because they were when I first got put on pelvic rest and had to leave work. Same timeline. Same account. I called his first ex-wife. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I just wanted someone to say out loud what I could feel pressing on my throat. She didn't sugarcoat it. She said he had told the kids from the start that traditions are for the original family, that he didn't want me changing the vibe for them. He told them not to worry about including me in exchanges or photos because it would confuse things, and that when they wanted his time, they'd always have first pick. When I asked if he'd ever said anything about our daughter, there was a long stretch of silence and then she said, he told them you two would do your own thing and not to complicate theirs. His words, not mine. When he got home that night, I put the stack on the kitchen table. He looked at the top page 1 of the clinic payments and his face did the pinch thing I've learned is him trying to figure out what version of the truth he can live with. He said, she's my daughter. I said, so is she, and I nodded toward the baby monitor, where our girl was falling asleep to white noise. He didn't look. The next day he asked me to go with him to his daughter's house. He said they wanted to clear the air and set healthier expectations. I packed a diaper bag, buckled my daughter into her car seat, and told myself I was going to hear people apologize for being unkind to a baby. They had wine poured when we got there. His daughter had a paper in her hand. She called it their boundary plan. She said going forward they were going to keep their nuclear family gatherings to themselves, and that if I wanted to host something separate with my side, I was welcome too. She said it like she was offering me a coupon. He sat on the couch and didn't say a word. I asked if our daughter would be invited to birthdays. She said they'd do something with Grandpa and the kids later. The kids did not include the one staring at a string of Christmas lights still draped over a bookshelf. I picked up my baby and stood up. I told them thank you for making it easy. He reached for my arm and said I was being dramatic. I shook him off. On my way out, I texted my attorney the address. The process server met me on the sidewalk and asked if I could confirm his name. I nodded. He walked inside 5 seconds behind me. I heard the envelope hit his palm in the exact tone his daughter uses when she doesn't get what she wants, a zip of outrage. I buckled my daughter in and drove away shaking so hard I had to pull over 2 blocks later to breathe. That night the supervisor texted me. A number I didn't have saved. She said she was sorry I've been dragged into a professional situation, that HR was involved now and she'd appreciate it if I stopped spreading narratives. I hadn't contacted HR. I hadn't contacted anyone at his job. I asked who told her I had. She didn't answer that. She did say, he told me you two were functionally separated for years. I looked at the baby monitor blinking on my nightstand and thought about the night I woke up postpartum at 2 a.m. And he wasn't home. He came by the next morning to talk like adults. I stayed in the doorway with my daughter on my hip. He said serving him at his daughter's house was cruel. He said he was embarrassed. He said this was going to make everything worse with the family. I told him the family he was worried about had never included the one person who can't even spell her own name yet. He told me the fertility money wasn't my business. I looked at the printout of our joint account and didn't bother replying. In the afternoon, his ex-wife messaged me again. A screenshot from a group chat. I don't belong to him, his 2 adult kids. He'd sent them a picture of our daughter's first Halloween costume last fall. It said, cute. Keep this off your mom's Facebook. We don't need drama. His daughter responded with a thumbs up and then, later, a separate message, so we're not doing gifts for that side then? He answered, no, it's better to keep lanes clear. It was from October. Before Christmas. Before I stood in their living room holding a baby with nothing to unwrap. I filed. The attorney moved fast. Temporary orders are in motion. I opened my own account and moved my direct deposit, put a stop on our joint card, and set a password at daycare pickup. I called the utility companies and learned he had added his daughter as an authorized user on our gas and power accounts years ago so she could handle things, if he was busy. I removed her. I packed a bag for a few days and took my daughter to my sister's, because I didn't trust him not to walk in and start carrying boxes. He sent a long email at midnight about how this is all stress and misunderstandings and that he'll set the record straight with everyone if that's what it takes. At the bottom there was a line about protecting assets that predate you, and then a PS that made my skin go cold. He had changed his 401 beneficiary earlier this year to his son until emotions cooled down. Our daughter's name wasn't anywhere. This morning I made oatmeal for my baby and she mashed blueberries into her hair and squealed when the dog sneezed. The house was quiet, and that way it gets when a storm just moved on. My phone buzzed. His daughter had posted a photo dump, a Sunday dinner, his arm around his grandkids, the twains in matching pajamas, everyone smiling. The caption was "Family First." Update 4. The temporary orders hearing felt like waiting at the wth.reddit. If the wth could take your last name and rearrange your future. The judge was a woman with a strip of white hair at her temple and a way of tapping her pen that made everyone in the row sit straighter. My husband wore the suit he saves for funerals and promotions. His daughter sat 2 seats behind him and didn't look at me. My attorney spoke in clean lines. Joint funds. Hotel receipts. The fertility clinic payment slid forward in a plastic sleeve. The judge paused when she hit the memo with my stepdaughter's last name. She said dissipation and financial restraining order, and then she looked over her glasses at him and asked why there were recent beneficiary changes. He tried the same pinched expression he uses when the truth won't fade in his mouth. He said, "It was a stressful time." The judge said stress isn't a legal strategy. She ordered no more changes to beneficiaries, no more moving money, temporary child support, and exclusive use of the house to me. She told him not to set foot at daycare without my written permission. She said it like she was flipping a sign to closed. I got to the parking lot and my phone was humming in my hand. Daycare. A soft-voiced woman I've only ever seen sing the clean-up song told me his daughter had shown up 30 minutes earlier with a tote of muffins and a smile, and asked for my baby. She tried a password. It was wrong. She tried another. It was family first, like a joke that doesn't land. They stalled her until the director got the order I'd emailed that morning. She left without the muffins. Back at the house, there was a white envelope propped in the mailbox with a red window of a bill you don't want to open. Insurance. An explanation of benefits for assisted reproductive services for a female dependent with my stepdaughter's birthday. The dates match the clinic payments. The plan only covers dependents under 26. She's 28. The last page said student verification on file. I called the number and put it on speaker and stirred oatmeal so it wouldn't clump. The rep read from a script and then stopped reading. He said my husband had submitted a student letter and a change form that listed my stepdaughter as half-time. He added her years ago. He had never taken her off. The rep said they flagged that in audits. He said this wasn't something I could fix on the phone. An hour later my husband texted the paragraph I knew was coming. I was costing him his job. HR was escalating. I hadn't contacted anyone. A second text came through with a photo of an ID badge clipped to a cardboard box. Administrative leave. He said if I kept this up our daughter's insurance would go, and I should think hard about that. I read it twice and then forwarded it to my attorney with no words, because there weren't any that wouldn't scorch. In the afternoon a nurse from a number I didn't recognize left a message confirming consent for storage. I called back. She was brisk until I gave my name. Then she softened and said she needed my signature on the guarantor paperwork for the embryo storage fees to continue auto-drafting. I told her I hadn't signed anything. There was a long pause, paper moving, a keyboard. She said, "It looks like we have your consent on file." I asked her to fax me whatever she had. 5 minutes later, a copy slid off my printer. My name, spelled right. My handwriting, spelled wrong. The G in my last name looked like it had been taught by someone else. The signature date was the week I was learning to sleep sitting up because rolling over felt like breaking. I drove to the precinct with my daughter in a car seat and a Ziploc bag with a fax inside. The detective used a pen to tap onto the signature, like he was marking a spelling test. He took a statement and gave me a little card with a case number. It felt both silly and enormous tucked in my pocket. On my way home I stopped at the clinic. I told the front desk I needed to speak to whoever handles billing for Dr. R. They put me in a side room that smelled like antiseptic and lavender and had a picture of a baby foot pushing against a belly printed on canvas. My stepdaughter walked in 2 minutes later with a tote bag that said "Mom" in gold script. She froze when she saw me. Then she lifted her chin in a way I've seen in a mirror on bad days. She said, "You didn't need to come here." I said, "You didn't need to put my name on your bills." She blinked fast, like she'd been slapped with water. Dad said it was the same account. That's all she offered. No sorry. No anything. I told her to tell him the police had my statement. Her mouth tightened and she said, "You're making this hard on him." I looked at the wall with a baby foot. I said, "He already dead." I went home and put my daughter down for a nap in a house that didn't feel like it would be taken from under us by someone else's crisis. The utilities customer service hold music was a piano version of a song that used to play on the radio when I still thought I'd get a baby shower that didn't end with me crying in a bathroom. I got through. I changed the passwords. I removed names. It felt like untying knots in a necklace threaded through my own hair. That night, right as the white noise machine caught the rhythm of her breath, headlights slid across my blinds like a flashlight in a childhood game. He was in the driveway with a rented truck and two of his son's friends. He banged the door like he was owed. The dog went wide-eyed and barked until his voice cracked. I opened the door with a paper in my hand and the porch light on his face. He said he was coming in for his things. I pointed at the order and then at the camera by the door. He took one step up. I called the non-emergency number on speaker and laid the phone on the whole table so everyone could hear the operator say what the operator says when she said it too many times. When the cruiser rolled up, he tried to look embarrassed and failed. The officer read the order, then told him to leave. He stood on my lawn and told me I was taking everything. I looked past him at the window where the edge of a pink sleep sack was just visible on the monitor. I told him I was keeping the one thing. After they were gone, there was a stack of folding chairs half collapsed on the grass. The kind you use at holidays. The kind the original family probably doesn't need to borrow anymore. In the morning I called the daycare to tell them about the police report and heard a rustle of relief travel across the line. The director said they had gotten a call last night from a woman trying to update the pickup list using my last name. She had mispronounced it. She hadn't known the name of my pediatrician. The director told me she hung up, and then she said, softly, "We have you, Mama." I cried in my car 2 parking spaces from the grocery store while my daughter chewed on a teether shaped like a strawberry and held it up like a trophy. At lunch a screenshot lit my phone up with blue. First ex-wife again. Group chat I don't belong to. My husband, 814 Ma. No one is to contact the clinic about anything. Legal is handling it. His daughter, 816 she already went. His son, 817 bro HR just called me. Then a string of messages where my husband wrote about how this was optics and how they needed to keep lanes clear until the audit is done. No mention of the baby who still says da da whenever the dog knocks over the laundry basket. I bought a mattress. The one I wanted 2 years and a lifetime ago. The delivery guys tracked a line of mud into the hall and apologized 6 times, and I didn't care. I stripped the old one down to the yellowed foam and the sad twin of it leaned against the wall like a secret you're done keeping. I put my daughter in the middle of the new bed and she rolled onto her belly and banged her open palm like she was starting the world's tiniest drum circle. We laid there with the radio at a whisper until she fell asleep with her mouth open, and for the first time in too long it felt like the house exhaled. At 5 p.m. my phone buzzed with a number I don't have saved. A new HR person. They said they were conducting a formal investigation into dependent eligibility and potential benefit misuse, and that I might be asked to provide documents. They told me my husband had been advised not to contact me about insurance. I said okay. I said thank you. I said nothing else, because there wasn't anything to add. At 7 p.m. his daughter posted a black and white photo of an ultrasound framed by manicured fingers with a caption about miracles and the best man I've ever known. The comments were full of hearts and halos. I turned my phone face down and lay very still and watched the baby monitor blink like a tiny lighthouse and thought about all the ships that still miss it on purpose. Update 5. The knock came at nap time, 3 soft taps that made the dog throw his whole body at the door. A woman with a clip-on badge and a sweat of the color of oatmeal stood on the porch and said my name in the tone you use for skittish animals. "A report," she said gently. "Unsafe sleep, maternal instability." Words read from a screen. I stepped back and waved her in past the white noise and the smell of pears baking in the oven because I forgot about them. She looked at the outlet covers, then the baby gaze, ran a finger along the crib slats where blueberries still ghosted in the grooves, crouched to eye level with my daughter and said hi in a voice that made my throat sting. "I don't see any immediate safety concerns," she said, pen still in her hand, the kind of sentence that comes with a form attached. "You'll get a letter." When she left she touched my elbow once like a comma. When the mail came there was a fat envelope with his company's return address and my name spelled right. Opera. Pages of numbers and a deadline stamped in red like something bleeding. I took a picture and sent it to my attorney, and then I filled out the children's plan through the state with a hand that shook so hard I had to steady the phone on the counter. 10 minutes later an auto reply said we'd hear in 5 business days. I read it out loud to the dog like it was a spell. At noon the detective called. He said the clinic had responded to the subpoena. He said there was internal video from the date on my consent that showed my husband and his daughter at the front desk. He said he couldn't give me a copy, but his tone shifted an inch softer when I didn't breathe for a beat. He asked if I'd come in to give handwriting exemplars. He said bring a bottle for the baby if I needed to. I hung up and stood in the kitchen and watched the oven smoke curl like a bad idea. The clinic compliance woman called an hour later. She'd traded lavender for bleach. We have corrected the guarantor to the appropriate patient, she said, precise as a scalpel. We've also notified the carrier of a dependent eligibility concern. I told her to take my name off anything that wasn't a pediatrician or a diaper delivery, and she said, it already is. At 2 my phone lit with a number I didn't recognize and a breath on the other end that sounded like it had been held too long. Her husband. The stepson-in-law whose nod I've seen a dozen times from across living rooms that weren't mine. He said he didn't know about any of it, not the insurance, not the letter that said student, not the paper with my name in the wrong hand. He said he had asked questions and been told it was handled. He apologized to a room that only had a sleeping baby and a dog in it. I should have said something, he said, voice wrecked like a car that ran the same corner too fast too many times. I didn't give him anything to pick up. He said he didn't know about the daycare. He said he'd never do with it to a mother. He said his voice wasn't big in that house. I told him to make it bigger. He said okay like he was trying it on. The first ex-wife and I met in the coffee shop that smells like burnt sugar in college. She had a folder with receipts from another lifetime and a weariness that sits under the eyes like a thumbprint. We didn't talk about love. We talked about light switches, how he tells you where they are and then turns them off when your back is turned. She signed as a witness on something my attorney needed and patted my baby's knee like she was clocking in for a shift she's worked before. At 4:19 my attorney called and said the judge set a contempt hearing. He had moved money after the restraining order. A drip of transfers to his son labeled rent even though his son owns. A nick off a 529 that was supposed to have my daughter's name on it once she had one to spell. We'll walk her through it, my attorney said, and I pictured the judge's temple streak and the pen tap like a metronome that keeps time for the end of a song. At 5 a new email slid in from HR. Not to me, forwarded from First X, whose sister still works 2 floors down from the break room with a bad coffee. Termination for cause. Repayment expected. A phrase about referral to authority that made my skin go tight. 5 minutes later he sent me a text that said I destroyed his livelihood and that any decent person would help him keep insurance in place for the child he had with me. I stared at the phrase he chose and wondered if his thumb hesitated before it hit send. I forwarded it to my attorney without adding air to it. The daycare director met me at the door in a cardigan with paint near the cuff. She asked if everything was okay, and when I nodded, she said, we've added a second password and a photo list and no one gets past the rug anymore. She called my daughter by her nickname without that family's last name braided onto it. I told her I'd bring muffins on Friday that weren't baked. I went to the precinct with my daughter in a carrier and a pen in my pocket. The detective put paper in front of me, and had me write the same sentence 10 times, I do not authorize charges. My hand cramped on the 4th one and I shook it out while my baby head-butted my chin on purpose and laughed at her own joke. When I finished, he slid another box of lines at me. He said, we'll be in touch, and I believed him. On the way home a white SUV idled across from our driveway with the engine loud like a dare. I pulled in behind it and waited. He rolled down the passenger window and leaned over the passenger seat like we were teenagers sneaking out. He said he'd filed to change venue. He said his attorney was not playing games and that I should think about a global solution. He kept saying global like it was a cruise. I told him the next time he said global I was calling the police. He said I was escalating. I raised my phone and took a picture of his plate. He drove away slow enough to make sure I knew he could. The letter from the state came faster than anything else has in months. Approved. Coverage start date in bold. I stuck it to the fridge with a pizza place magnet and danced my daughter around the kitchen until the dog tried to cut in. I fed her peas and tiny stars and kissed the spot where her hair always refuses to lie down. At 7:50 a.m., his daughter posted a reel. A hand on a belly at sunset, cursive script sliding across the screen, blessed by the best. Her husband's profile wasn't tagged. The comments were oceans of glitter and praise and 2 old women from church saying prayers hand emoji, prayers hand emoji. I watched it once and then again with the sound off and the captions gone. It made the shapes more honest. At 9 p.m., I found an envelope shoved under my door like a thought someone couldn't say out loud. A photocopy of a notarized affidavit with my name typed under a signature that wasn't mine and a notary stamp from an upstore near his office. The date made my stomach crawl. I called the detective and he said, save the envelope. I put it in a Ziploc with the same care you use for a butterfly. The contempt hearing is Monday. My attorney said wear something that makes you feel like you have bones. I tried on a black dress that fits again and a pair of flats that don't pinch and stood in front of the mirror with my daughter on my hip making faces like a fish. The house was quiet and that held breath way before a firework goes or doesn't. Out the window the folding chairs were still there in the grass leaning on each other like gossip. I thought about burning them and then I didn't. Right before bed, the daycare app pinged with a picture. My daughter holding a paintbrush the wrong way, green streak across her cheek, grinning like she invented mess. The caption said, "She chose the color herself." I turned the phone face down and pressed my palm flat on the new mattress and felt how firm it was, how it didn't give under me, how sometimes the ground can be the thing that finally refuses to drop. Update 6. The contempt hearing felt like standing in a cold shower in your clothes. The judge's hair was pulled tighter, the pen tapped louder. His attorney tried to turn rent into air quotes and misunderstanding into a parachute. The judge didn't hand him one. She said, "Denied," to the venue change without blinking. She said contempt like a door slamming and sanctions like a receipt printing. He owes back what he moved, plus my attorney's fees, and a line item for the 529 raindrops he shook out of the cloud. Purge conditions will be clear in the written order, she said, and then she made one thing very, very plain: no third parties contacting daycare, no third parties appearing for exchanges, period. She said third parties like it was a splinter she was done digging out. His daughter was in the back row, full spine, jaw set. When the bailiff said, "All rise," she didn't. When we were in the hall, his attorney told mine that my tone was making this worse. My attorney smiled with all her teeth and said, "My tone is a court order." On the way out, the first CPS letter was in my box like a press leaf. Unfounded. No services needed. The caseworker's name in blue ballpoint that looped the Y in a way that looked like a little tail wag. I put it on the fridge under the pizza magnet like a child's drawing that finally looks like a house. The detective called at lunchtime with the up story told flat. The notary journal didn't have my name in it. It had my stepdaughter's, twice, like the second time made it true. The ID number didn't match any I've ever had. The manager at the store remembered my husband, the man with the tie who kept tapping, but not me. The detective said they'd asked for surveillance. He said words like fraudulent acknowledgement the way a contractor says dry rot. When I hung up, there was a new number on my phone with a heavy breathing start that turned into, "I'm out." The stepson-in-law. He said he'd moved to his brother's couch because every surface in the house felt sticky with a story. He said he found a screenshot on their iPad of an email draft with my name on a consent form and a saved image of my driver's license from an old daycare enrollment packet I'd sent to a groupie email years ago. He forwarded it to her, he said, voice low like he was whispering to a sleeping dog. Subject line said, "Use this." He texted it to my attorney with a single word, "Sorry." An hour later, HR different voice again left a message that sounded like someone reading a script while trying not to step on a mine. They said a referral had gone to their insurer's special investigations unit. The state might contact me. They said they'd mail me a COBRA appeal form, but that his termination for cause made the window tight. I stood in the kitchen and folded dish towels like precision could make money appear. He didn't text again until dusk when the light goes gold and then mean. "We can fix this if you stop making a show," he wrote. I stared at the word show while the dog blew a sigh into the floorboards, and my daughter hammered her cup against the tray, like a blacksmith. I forwarded it to my attorney and then set my phone face down and cut grapes into tiny, reasonable halves. At 7 on the dot there was a tight knock. The notary. Blonde bob, trembling mouth, stamp in a little black case like a pet. She stood on my porch and told me she makes $8 per stamp and thought he said you were running late. She said she'd lose her commission. I thought about the day my baby was born and the nurse who whispered "You're doing so good" into my hair like a blessing. I told the notary I had a case number and a detective's card and that she needed to call him before she called anyone else. She cried in a way you try not to when your makeup matters. When she left I could smell her perfume like a decision lingering. The clinic called next, billing this time, voice cheerfully square. They said as of today the guarantor had been corrected and the outstanding storage fees would not draft from any account with my name on it. They asked if I wanted a letter to that effect. Yes, I said, please, yes. The email hit my inbox with my name in bold next to the words "removed." I printed it and scotch taped it inside the pantry door like a superstition. He tried the driveway again in a different car, a gray one that had rental still on a paper tag. He stayed in the car this time and honked once like we were late for church. I didn't answer the door. He called, and when I picked up, he went right to the soft spot he thinks I have. "We could lose the embryos if nobody pays," he said, full voice, no shame in the naming. I looked at the baby monitor. She had one arm thrown up over her head like she had a question for the teacher. "You already lost your job," I said. Pay them with whatever you use to buy folding chairs. He hissed through his teeth and said, "You're not who I thought you were." I said, "I finally am." He sat there long enough for the white noise to fade, then drove away slow like he was pulling ribbon. At 9, the first ex-wife sent a photo of something my attorney had asked for and then, uninvited, a sentence that hit like a blunt object wrapped in velvet. He is very good at making panic feel like oxygen. I turned off the kitchen light and stood still and listened to the house hum like it was answering roll call. In the morning the daycare director met me with a clipboard and a smile that looked like armor. "We made a photo board for the front desk," she said, flipping to a laminated page with a line of faces under the words approved pickups, and bubble letters. My daughter's grin was there next to mine. No one else's. The director tapped the page with her pen, not hard. "We got you," she said. I brought muffins that weren't bait and she laughed and told me not to get her fired for mouthfuls on the rug. At lunchtime, my attorney sent over the signed order. Black and white, dense and final. He has 72 hours to pay what he moved and 10 days to produce full statements or the court will appoint a forensic accountant at his expense. No third-party contact with the child or the daycare. No more changes, transfers, or beneficiary games. The judge's name under the last line, the stylish loop of her first initial like a flourish you are in. I slid the paper under a magnet on the fridge and watched it settle like it had always been meant to live there. 5 minutes later my phone pinged with a screenshot from First X. The group chat that I don't belong to lit up with my husband's name and the words "we go quiet until this cools off." His daughter replied with a photo of a calendar and a circle around a date in June and the words "baby shower no drama rule." His son sent a thumbs up and then, separate, "What about the audit?" His answer, "Handled." The next bubble never landed. He was removed from the chat. First X added one quiet period and then, "I think the kids just fired their father." I didn't feel triumph. I felt something like rain hitting after the ground has turned to dust. It smells like relief until you remember it's still a storm. At dusk, the detective called again. He said the Up Store video had been sent. He said my husband was on it with my stepdaughter, the notary stamp hitting paper while my name sat like a sticker somebody peeled too slow. He said the DA's office had assigned someone. He said this would take time. "You're doing everything right," he told me, and I believed him even if right looks like eating cereal over the sink while a dog watches your spoon and a baby laughs at air. I bought a lockbox and a silly little label maker that makes everything feel official. I put birth certificates, social security cards, the order. I labeled it Bones. It made me laugh in a way that cleaned my rebs out. My daughter fell asleep early with green paint still in the valley of her fingernails and her hair smelling like shampoo that cost $3 and 1,000 decisions. I stood at the window and looked at the folding chairs, still there, still leaning into each other like people who never learned to stand on their own. The porch light made a soft circle on the grass. For a second I thought about dragging the chairs to the curb. Then I did. I locked the door, checked the monitor, and lay down on the mattress that finally does what Surface is supposed to do, old,